Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Oh, we're good. We're well over. So
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So good evening, everyone. This is the Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5. My name is Leila Logesico. I'm the chair. I would like to call this meeting to order. A few words about how the meeting is going to proceed. We have one application tonight that is coming to us from the Department of City Planning. And that is a citywide zoning tax amendment for climate change and climate resiliency. This is the only item that we have tonight on the agenda. So the applicant, the Department of City Planning, will have an opportunity to give a presentation tonight. Following this presentation, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask questions. Then I will open up the floor to members of the public. Members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. Once this question and comment period from members of the public concludes, we will move back and I will give the applicant, the Department of City Planning, an opportunity to give a closing statement. Then we will move to business session. During business session, only members of the committee are allowed to discuss the matter. We will make a recommendation, make a motion, take this motion to a vote. The vote of tonight of the committee will be then presented to the full board of Community Board 5, which meets on Thursday, June the 8th at 6 p.m. And the vote of the committee the position of the committee will be presented to the full board of CB5 for a vote. The vote of the full board becomes the official position of the community board. This will then be forwarded to the relevant parties, in this case, the Department of City Planning, the City Planning Commission, as well as the council members that represent CB5. Before we go into the presentation tonight, I have a couple of announcements. They're unusual, but it's actually really good news. I wanted to share with the committee that the Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee of Manhattan Community Board 5 has been recognized with an award from the Historic Districts Council. They are recognizing the work of our committee in the context of our advocacy around Penn Station. And the committee is receiving a grassroots award. So, I'm very proud of the work of the committee. I'm very, very happy to share this news with you all. I will send an email with all the details. The Historic Districts Council will have an awards celebration on June 13th at 6 p.m., where Aaron and I will be very honored to receive this award on behalf of the committee. So once again, really thank you for all the work that you guys do. We can't do it without all of you, so much gratitude. The second announcement that I wanted to make is that I wanted to share with members of the committee as well as members of the public that this morning the MTA had their monthly board meeting. During this monthly session, some board members asked questions to the leadership of MTA about Penn Station, as well as about the Madison Square Garden special permit. During this meeting, the head of the construction and development for the MTA, Jamie Torres-Springer, made a statement in which he explained that the MTA is preparing a report at the request of the Department of City Planning and the City Planning Commission to determine whether Madison Square Garden is compatible with Penn Station. And Mr. Torres-Springer expressed that at this very moment, the finding of the MTA is that Madison Square Garden is not compatible and has not responded to requests for making MSG compatible. So we don't know whether this report has been issued yet, but certainly right now the MTA is on record saying that Madison Square Garden has not reached a level of compatibility with Penn Station. Wanted to note for everyone that the City Planning Commission is holding a hearing on the very topic of Madison Square Garden special operating permit on June 7th. I do not know if it is the first item on the agenda, but it is probably somewhere in the morning. When that becomes clear, I'll make sure to share this information with all of you. And of course, if you're so inclined, sign up. Our voices matter. So I'm encouraging everyone to go and testify. If you are testifying and planning to testify in person, please let me know and make sure to notify me, because we want to make sure that logistically the City Planning Commission is able to accommodate the number of speakers that intend to go in person. So with all of that said, I will now turn it to the applicants. I think we're joined by Janelle and Stephen of the Department of City Planning. Thank you so much for being with us tonight for this important citywide zoning tax amendment. The floor is yours. Feel free to share your screen and tell us all about this pretty ambitious project.
Thank you very much. My name is Stephen Johnson. Maybe some of you remember me from the MSG presentation. And I encourage you all to come down for the June 7th public hearing. The one from 10 years ago, the hearing was about 5 hours long, but we'll see how long it lasts this time. It should be interesting. But what we're here for today, I'm here with Jonelle Clark, who's the Community Board 5 liaison for city planning. And she's going to be presenting the City of Yes carbon neutrality project. And what this is part of a larger project with the city. There's 3 separate initiatives that are all going to be coming to you. This is the first one, carbon neutrality. The second one is economic opportunity. And the third is housing opportunity. And we tried to spread these out a little bit so they're not coming to you all at the end of anybody's administration, that some of you may remember, so that you have time to review things and we can get your feedback on that. So what I would say about carbon neutrality before we kick it over to Janelle is that we have a lot of information on our website for this project. It's a citywide, so that means all the planners have to present in front of their community boards. So like for MSG, I came here and presented because I'm the project manager, so I know everything about the project that could possibly be known about MSG. But carbon neutrality is a little bit different because we had to get briefed on it too, and we're learning it, but we have a lot of information. So if you have any extra need for information, if you go to the city planning website and look up carbon neutrality, there's a web page that gives you all sorts of details. If you go to the ZAP portal, hopefully some of you are familiar with our portal, and if you go on the portal and search for it, the project description, the zoning text, I think it's like 100 pages long. There's a lot of information there that's open for you to review. And even more probably interesting for us was that when the project manager, Nihilus, was presenting this to the commission, it was an hour-long presentation, and the commission had about an hour's worth of questions, and he was able to, discuss it in detail, and there were some very good questions by the commission. So there's a lot of stuff out there. And what I'll do is, while Janelle is presenting the program for carbon neutral, I can put some links into the chat if anybody's interested. And then also any questions that we're not able to answer, I think Leila, you said your larger board meeting is in about a week or 2.
2 weeks, yes.
2 weeks. Right. So anything we're not able to answer, we will definitely get responses and get them to you before that date, so that that information can be disseminated to everybody on the community board. So with that, I'll hand it over to Janelle, and she can present, and then we could help answer questions at the end.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Janelle, and as Steve said, I'm the planner liaison for Community Board 5. So I'm going to be presenting this evening, and I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm here this evening to talk to you about City of Yes for carbon neutrality, which is an opportunity to update our zoning regulations to help all of us meet our city's climate goals. City of Yes for carbon neutrality is the first of 3 projects that the Department of City Planning is developing as part of Mayor Adams' broader City of Yes initiative. It asks agencies to take a hard look at outdated regulations that may be holding New Yorkers back from investing in their homes, businesses, and our city overall. Two other initiatives, Economic Opportunity and Housing Opportunity, will begin more public engagement later this summer. They are distinct and independent proposals, and to avoid overwhelming community members during the public review process, they're being staggered the rest of this year and into next year. We have been researching sustainability-related issues for several years, since Zone Green in 2012, and with this foundation in place, we're ready to advance this work first. Also, many of the elements of this proposal are urgently needed, as they will deliver zoning relief to home and building owners who are trying to undertake smart retrofit projects that cut energy costs and help the environment, but are prevented from doing so by zoning. Finally, City of Yes for carbon neutrality isn't the last word on sustainability. Sustainable practices have been deeply embedded into our planning work for decades and will continue to be present in all of the work we do, including economic opportunity and housing opportunity. First, I want to take a minute to frame our conversation. It's important to emphasize that we're facing a climate emergency, and it is largely fueled by global carbon dioxide emissions. Carbon dioxide makes up the vast majority of the United States greenhouse gas emissions, to be more specific, 80% in 2019. Carbon dioxide generally comes from human activity, specifically the combustion of fossil fuels like diesel, gasoline, natural gas, and home heating oil. In 2016, the world community joined together to sign the Paris Agreement, a vision to reduce human greenhouse gas emissions in order to limit overall global warming to 2 degrees Celsius and thus prevent further environmental damage associated with climate change. Here in New York City, we've been implementing this vision through a number of initiatives under the umbrella of achieving carbon neutrality by reducing the city's emissions 80% by 2050, or 80 by 50 for short. Now I'll explain what we mean by a carbon neutral city. It's a city in which we're focused on reducing operational carbon emissions in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. To do this, we need to reduce our overall energy needs. This can be done by retrofitting almost every building in the city to become highly efficient to reduce wasted energy. A carbon neutral city is one where we've cleaned the grid by switching from a fossil fuel powered electricity to renewable energy resources such as solar and wind. A carbon neutral city is one where we've electrified all remaining energy needs, That includes our vehicles and buildings as well. This means moving away from fossil fuel fired furnaces and boilers to newer electrically powered technologies for heating and cooling, namely heat pumps. The chart on this slide shows that the key driver of our city's carbon emissions by far is our building sector, and the relationship between our buildings and the zoning laws that govern them is significant. To give some background info, 10 years ago, the department issued Zone Green, which was the first comprehensive overhaul of our zoning to support emerging green technologies like rooftop wind and solar. That was just a start. In some ways, this research serves as follow-up to Zone Green and a chance to revisit it after 10 years in order to make updates and adjustments in light of the many technological and legal changes since then. Since 2016, these include the focus on decarbonization stemming from the Paris Agreement and 80 by 50. These also include feedback from architects, engineers, and advocates about issues they've identified and ideas for improvements, as exemplified in this report from the Urban Green Council called Zone Greener. This also includes updating the zoning to reflect the Climate Mobilization Act at the city level, as well as the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act at the state level. Development of this proposal began in March of 2022 when Mayor Adams announced his vision for a city of yes. Since then, we've conducted extensive outreach, in particular with practitioners and other subject matter experts, to help us ensure this proposal will be helpful to those interested in adding solar, EV chargers, or heat pumps to their homes and businesses. In an attempt to share more information prior to the public review process, City Planning has held 4 open to the public information sessions on this research, to which our chair, Dan Garodinick, invited all community board chairs and encouraged them to share the information for these events with their boards. Also in March, we partnered with the Urban Green Council, a recognized leader in climate work in New York City, to assemble a group of technical and policy experts to review an initial draft of the proposal to validate the climate goals we're trying to support, as well as the solutions we're putting forward. Along the way, we've asked experts, nonprofit leaders, and advocates about what is needed to help achieve our collective climate goals and how has zoning helped or hurt. Meeting the challenge of our climate crisis is a massive undertaking, and through our engagement over the last year, we've identified a number of ways that zoning can help support this effort. Tonight, we'll review the 4 key goals of this proposal, the 4 key goals that this proposal seeks to support, as well as the 17 specific zoning changes we've identified to achieve these goals. The first key goal is supporting the decarbonization of our city's energy grid. Illustrated on this slide are initiatives already underway at the state or city level. These are not a part of our zoning proposal, but they are the context in which our planning work is situated. By 2040, New York State is legally required to achieve a 100% renewably based energy grid. To support this, we will be developing large amounts of offshore wind and bringing in more clean hydroelectric power from upstate and Canada. However, this transition will need an all-hands-on-deck approach. This includes using all of our rooftops to generate energy across the city. To give you a sense of where we stand with rooftop solar, in 2016, we set a goal of getting to 1,000 megawatts of rooftop solar across the city by 2030. To date, we're currently at around 300 to 400 megawatts. This means we have 7 years to more than double the amount of solar in New York City in order to meet this goal. To utilize the energy from offshore wind and rooftop solar, our energy grid will have to become smarter and more decentralized, with resources spread throughout the city instead of limited to utility sites and outlying areas. To support this more decentralized grid, we will need to rely on energy storage, essentially large batteries, which will act as the glue holding this grid together. To support the ongoing work of cleaning the grid, New York City zoning can help in 5 key areas. First, we can analyze our rooftop zoning allowances. In many districts, there are current limitations on the amount of rooftop that can be covered by solar canopies. This proposal will update those rules to allow roofs to be completely covered by solar. Second, we can take a similar approach for our city's 8,000 plus acres of open parking areas by updating the zoning to allow solar canopies over parking lots. Thirdly, currently generating clean energy for utility customers elsewhere in neighborhoods is considered a commercial use through the community solar program. But this does not take into account other large residential campuses, hospitals, schools, and colleges in residential districts where community solar would be a great fit. The zoning rules can also be updated to allow this. Fourth, zoning can allow for FDNY and Department of Building reviewed storage facilities to be located where they are needed the most. Energy storage is currently not allowed in the residence districts where customers need access to clean and renewable energy. Zoning needs to be updated to add specific rules for energy storage and help facilitate its rollout across the city. Finally, onshore wind faces strict limits in today's zoning without a relief valve for sites where greater heights may be appropriate. The zoning proposal will create a new tool that can be used by future applicants to submit onshore wind facilities for a public review process with the City Planning Commission. To be clear, this proposal does not change current height restrictions on wind turbines. The second seeks to eliminate fossil fuels from our city's million-plus existing buildings, almost all of which will be around in 2050 when we need to have achieved carbon neutrality. These buildings are by far our biggest sources of carbon dioxide emissions, and to improve, we'll need to retrofit virtually every single building to return oil or gas-powered furnaces and boilers, replace them with new, highly efficient electric systems, and improve the efficiency of exterior walls, windows, and roofs to keep the heat and cool inside. It's essential to note 2 important laws adopted by the City Council in 2019 and 2021. For large buildings, which are considered ones 25,000 square feet and larger, Local Law 97 will begin to impose fines if they do not cut their carbon emissions. Fines will begin in 2024 and will increase through 2050. Second, Local Law 154 requires that all newly constructed buildings are electrified from the get-go. Fossil fuel-based equipment will no longer be allowed in new construction. Within this context, zoning can help support the decarbonization of buildings in 3 key ways. First, zoning can accommodate the increasing need for outdoor equipment, such as heat pumps, to be located above the zoning height limit on building rooftops. By adjusting the zoning regulations, we'll give homeowners, architects, and engineers greater flexibility to navigate their best path to electrification. Second, zoning can be adjusted to simplify the processes of adding thicker insulation or recladding large buildings, which is done by removing an old facade and replacing it with a new, more efficient one. Thirdly, the 2012 Zone Green Wall Thickness Deduction is a zoning incentive that needs updating. It awards a small amount of additional floor area for better than code buildings and can be modernized to reflect the latest energy code and best practices for the future. Finally, on the topic of cost, undertaking this work will not be free, but there are billions of dollars available at the federal, state, and city level to support these projects. The New York City Accelerator is a program run out of the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice that can help you connect with technical and financial support before starting a project, and they're available to help you out whenever you may need. Thirdly, zoning seeks to decarbonize the private vehicles New Yorkers drive and own. There are currently 2 million private vehicles registered in New York City, and less than 1% of those are zero emission. To help owners make the switch to electric, federal and state initiatives are underway. In the meantime, zoning can be updated to address these can be parked and charged. Addressing this need will be the key to helping New Yorkers make the switch. By 2030, New York State and Albany has indicated that all new vehicles sold in the state will need to be zero emission. This will be a long-term transition, but we know that the future is electric and there will be a greater need for places these vehicles can be charged. Finally, we must acknowledge other forms of transportation. The more trips that can be taken by bicycle, scooter, on foot, or by transit, the better for our health, environment, and city. Within this context, zoning can help support this goal with 5 key changes. First, we can allow charging facilities in all commercial and manufacturing districts. Second, we can allow building owners to designate a portion of their existing parking spaces as public EV charger sharing spaces. The same rules that currently apply today for car sharing vehicles in existing parking garages and lots. Third, we can allow for more flexible use of public parking lots, parking garages, and commercial accessory parking facilities by allowing car rentals and sharing, commercial vehicle storage, and public EV charging within these facilities too. Fourth, special rules that only apply in Manhattan can be expanded to allow indoor automated parking facilities to be available to everyone citywide. Fifth, parking rules can be updated to acknowledge the need for public bicycle parking and allow bike parking facilities in commercial districts. Finally, our last goal relates to reducing our city's stormwater and solid waste and helping eliminate the carbon emissions associated with both of these waste streams. We can reduce stormwater runoff by promoting greater permeability on site. This means transporting less water to energy-intensive treatment plants. Second, we can reduce the energy associated with hauling and processing garbage. Up to 45% of our waste stream is organic material that does not need to go to landfills and can be reused within the city. Third, using rooftops to promote local food production can reduce carbon emissions associated with our current agricultural practices. Within this context, zoning can help contribute to a better environment in 4 key ways. First, we can clarify zoning's paving rules to ensure that permeable paving is always allowed. Second, we can update street tree requirements to allow for new high-performance tree bed types, such as connected tree beds and rain gardens. Third, we can outline rules on compost and recycling by defining where these uses are allowed to help these sectors grow. Finally, we can simplify the process of building rooftop greenhouses on top of non-residential buildings by removing the requirement for a certification from the chair of the City Planning Commission. By streamlining this requirement, we'll allow the Department of Buildings to review applications for building permits cut on their community's rooftops. That concludes our overview of the 17 specific zoning changes we've identified to help support the larger project of decarbonizing our city in efforts to keep it clean, healthy, and equitable for the years to come. As a citywide zoning text amendment, this process will continue for the next several months. All 59 community boards will be concurrently reviewing this proposal with their borough boards and borough presidents. In July, the City Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on the proposed changes. In August, taking into account all they've heard during the review process, the commission will vote on approving or modifying the proposal and will then pass it on to the City Council, where the council will have 50 days to ultimately adopt the zoning changes and make them a law. Thank you so much for listening. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you so much. That was very dense, a lot of information. We really appreciate it. Let's jump right in. Members of the committee, if you have questions, you can use the raise hand function. And I see Dave Achilles with his head up. Dave, you take the first question. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering if you had considered using the East River as a source of renewable energy, supposedly that generators could be placed in the river and the great currents that go there 24 hours a day could be used to create a lot of energy. Is that somewhere in your playbook?
That is not somewhere in our playbook. We're just covering zoning and land use, and anything within the water opens up many federal and state and local agencies. That doesn't mean that that's not a valid idea, but we did not look at that for this proposal.
Thank you. I have a couple of practical technical questions, if you can help us with that. What is our deadline to provide comments?
That is on the website and was in the letter when that was referred to you, but I'll look that up this evening and put that in the chat.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And then my other question is, do you take into account, when you talk about building efficiency, are you strictly talking about the operations of these buildings, or are you also talking about the construction of these buildings?
My understanding, it's the operations of the buildings, which is why some of these older buildings are finding it hard. They haven't gotten very high energy efficiency ratings, and it's harder, obviously, for an older building to meet current standards. So I think architecture and, for example, LEED certifications are different from this.
Okay, thank you. Renee, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I think this is really interesting and exciting. I don't understand if, like, solar and wind, they're sort of intermittent sort of energy sources. How do you make sure that is it those batteries? Is that how it works, so that we always have it? Like, we hear of brownouts and the weather's so crazy. I just wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So not most, but a large part of this carbon neutral regulation proposal is focused on the generation and the storage of these energy, and that's making it more permissive to put that in your building, putting it in a parking lot, etc. I think from my knowledge of the subject, the wind turbines are something that hasn't really happened yet, or hasn't exactly been proposed yet, but it's just kind of opening the door. It's like the beginning of the idea of doing this. Well, we already have EV vehicles, we already have charging stations for cars, and every building can do something on their rooftop, whether it's a greenhouse, a green roof, or putting in storage, energy storage capacity within their building. So I think that's how I'm conceptualizing the process, is that the solar energy and the storage of that we're making the zoning more permissible to do that for each individual building. While the wind turbine, I'm not sure exactly how that would be stored and where it would be stored, or finding the location to have it be stored. But that also is intended to be a ULURP process. So that would go through a public review process to do wind turbines somewhere. Whereas what we're trying to do with the solar, for example, is make it more as of right, So for example, if your building needs to put in a green roof or put in solar panels, they don't have to come to city planning. They don't have to get an approval and spend the time, money, and energy to get that approved. It's more as of right.
Thank you, Renee. Do you have a follow-up?
I do. Does that mean that energy, if I put a solar panel on my building, is that my energy, or will that go to a greater grid for everyone?
It's, well, I'm not sure about the bigger picture, but it's supposed to go to your building. It's supposed to be helping your building. Like we've had projects pre-COVID where people could get solar panels put on the roof of their brownstone, for example. You see a lot of it in Flatbush in Brooklyn. So that's only for your own building. And what these sites do, like the site that Janelle mentioned, I'll put in a link into the chat in a moment, but the New York City Accelerator site, you can go to that website, which is accelerator.nyc, and you put in your building address, and it gives you, if there's any information to reflect in that, it'll give you information on your building and your energy use and how that's related to City Council's local law 97 and the compliance of that. And also the New York City Accelerator program will give you free expert information and guidance on how to update and make your building or house more energy efficient. And there's trainings there too. So I highly recommend using that resource.
Thank you. The next question goes to Andreas.
Thanks, Leila. I actually have a very specific question. I don't know if it's the right forum to ask those regarding the text amendment itself.
Go ahead.
Okay. So page 9, I don't know if you guys have it in front of you, but under the section ultra low energy building, under B2, you reference 50% better than ASHRAE 90.1. Question, which ASHRAE standard do you refer to? Is it 2020 or?
I don't know that information.
Okay.
Do you know that one? So we can go back and get a response for that. If are you looking for something particular? Just what standard, what year?
Yeah, because I think the 22 standard is very different than 18. Has some rich calculations in there and all kind of different things. So it would be good to have a reference point.
Okay.
And
we found that a lot of these things, we did this with Zone Green too 10 years ago, is that we found that when you're dealing with a technology that's cutting edge and changing, it's difficult to write zoning regulations, which are slow, old, and boring.
Absolutely.
And have it reflect what's going on in modern.
Yeah, I think that's in general a big challenge we face as practitioners. I think that zoning and reference guidelines are often outdated. The other question I had in under B2.2, you reference the source. Actually, on 2.1 also you should clarify if it's source or site energy use intensity. Under 2.2. You reference the source EUI of 38 kBtu. That's basically passive house level performance. I guess that's where the number comes from. The newest passive house standard 10, at least the PHI standard, actually has adjustments for use of buildings. So they adjust the EUI for hospital differently than a trading floor, an office, a residential building. Because I think what we have seen in large buildings in urban settings, the 38 is sometimes very tight. Specifically, if you have a very high use intense building like a hospital, for example. And so the newest thinking behind that standard is to give an adjustment towards the source EUI. So you might want to go back and research it a little bit more. My other question was, are those numbers also referenced in local law 97? Is that kind of aligned with each other?
That's another question. We'll have to go back and check on that for you.
And one more question under D, which is very important, I think, under C, which is a big additional service for professionals to do an energy modeling. What I have heard from the industry is that, of course, that's put on the architects usually, or consultants. My question is, which energy model are you requiring? Is one required to use a specific approved by the Secretary of State, or is that open to any energy model?
Those are all excellent questions, and we'll take them back for you.
Okay, and I can write them down maybe for you guys. So
Yeah,
you have-
that would be very helpful. All the
That'd be helpful.
questions that starts with, on page such and section that, I think that, putting them in writing is going to be very helpful. Thank you so much, Andreas. Next question goes to Mike.
Okay, thank you. So most of this is about making things as of right. So what will stay chair certification, or what will stay ULURP, or is there anything additional that will be chair certification or ULURP?
So the issue with the wind turbines is the main one that's getting more review, and that's for a CPC authorization. So the wind turbine, and then for really large energy storage of 10,000 square feet goes to the BSA. So those are the two main ones.
Say that again, Stephen. Which one goes to the BSA?
For the energy storage units, the large ones for over 10,000 square feet, those go to BSA.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Mike, do you have any follow-ups or
No.
other? Okay.
I'm good.
Thank you. Aaron, you get the next one.
Thanks for a great presentation. This question is related to, I guess, the future of car charging businesses. Is the vision that parking garages continue to maybe become a hybrid business of charging and parking, or would this new zoning text change allow for example, a separate business that is just the business of charging cars? And the reason I ask that is that could any residential or commercial retail space become a car charging place, for example, or is this very specific to where and when a parking lot is even allowed as of right? But could you speak to that? So say, a 5,000 square foot Duane Reade becomes vacant. Can that become a charging business the way this is laid out?
So in relationship to Manhattan, so there's two rough buckets here. One is for on-street parking and one is for off-street parking. So for on-street parking, that is controlled by the Department of Transportation, and DOT is working with the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice to expand access to public EV charging on streets throughout the city. But that's a different bucket, and city planning doesn't control that. So in relationship to off-street parking, it's focused on existing parking facilities. And as you know, parking facilities in the Manhattan core are, you have to get special approvals to get anything above as of right. Parking lots are not permitted in Midtown or in Lower Manhattan. It's very restrictive as to where parking facilities can go. So we don't have a lot of open parking lots, but it allows for, so right now a parking garage can put in as many EV charging, EV ready chargers that they want. One of the things that the City Planning Commission is doing is asking applicants who come in for any project related to parking, they're asking them that question, like, how many chargers are you putting in? Are you making it EV ready or EV capable? There's different levels of EV charging, whereas I can't remember the exact terminology, but there's a certain number of vehicles that can actually plug in. And then there's the number of vehicles where the infrastructure is there to put in the chargers, but there's nobody taking up the chargers because there's not enough EV vehicles yet. So it's something that we're encouraging, it's City Council's encouraging, and it enables you to put the charging storage facilities in your residential building, for example. So if you live in a large apartment building that has parking spaces already, so there's no question about you having parking spaces in your building off street, you will then be able to put more chargers and charger storage in your building, in your residential building, which is an issue that's been discussed for a variety of reasons, because I think people have seen different articles about safety issues and fire issues. So all that has to be reviewed by FDNY and DOB in order to get those permitted into your building. And that's also part of the New York City Accelerator website, where they tell you how to do everything and how to put different packages of that together for your building.
Thank you. Any other questions, Aaron?
No.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of questions of my own. So you mentioned a modest zoning incentive if a building is better than code. Can you actually speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So unfortunately, I don't know the exact how modest the modesty is, but the idea is if you put in cladding outside your building that takes up, it comes out 6 inches on the frontage of your building, that counts as floor area, right? And if your building is already built to the maximum floor area, then you're not technically permitted to do that because you're increasing your floor area, increasing the building. So my understanding is what they're doing is saying if you do something to make your building more energy efficient like that, then you're not going to get dinged for that extra square footage on the outside.
Does it mean that, for example, if I replace all my windows, I get to build in another story on my building?
Well, that's a developer question, isn't it? I don't think so, but I'll look into it.
We're just trying to poke and see where the possible
Sure.
loopholes that our great developer community will
Get
embrace.
another story on their building, right?
My other question is, so if I understand correctly from Renee's question, these solar panels that would be installed on buildings, it is really for this specific building. Basically, the incentive stays where the investment is made. Does that mean that we're going to develop a framework of a right to solar? Because let's say that I live in a small building, 5-story building. I do this massive investment. I convince my condo, co-op, rental, whatever, to put solar panels, and then a super tall comes in and I have no sun. What happens there? And how are you thinking about these challenges?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure how to answer that question. I'd have to go back and ask them if that's an issue. I understand the issue of taller buildings putting you not able to get the direct sunlight onto your solar panels. But are you also asking if you don't have the money to put in solar panels or put in any resiliency?
No, we're in this particular district, we've dealt with, the issue of access to sunlight.
Yeah.
In direct sunlight, especially in parks, which, we consider that, parks are, that sunlight is a natural resource that should be, a public resource and shouldn't be privatized. And, we've had many challenges in all of our parks and, including Central Park with very large towers that cast, huge shadows on our public spaces. And, and we understand that, the zoning does not provide actually for protection for these kinds of, shadow encroachments. But now it looks like we're going to run into the same kind of issue where, the sun may be hitting a particular rooftop. This, the owner of this building may decide to do a massive investment to actually, support the goal of the zoning tax amendment, only to see this investment reduced to zero because, the sun is no longer there. So, we certainly believe very strongly that, access to sunlight is a natural resource. We know because we've researched the issue that, other cities, including Tokyo and some cities in Europe, have actually provisions in their zoning code. And, I think that, sort of certainly speak for myself. I think that, going the route of solar is very, very sensible and something that, urgently needs to be done. And, I hope that this board, will support this initiative. I think it's really great. We want to make sure that it is done in a way that is, thought out. And once again, it may be a challenge very specific to our, highly built environment, and, may be very different in the outer boroughs. But, I think that certainly for our, very dense district, the densest in the country, we need to think about it in those terms.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea because you could, the zoning resolution is old and boring and difficult to change, but seeker is also difficult to make any changes. But you could see how that could be a position to include into an environmental review for any tall building, to say, are you blocking, not only you creating shadows, but you're blocking solar panels from getting their sun for their building. So I'll get back to you on that if there's been any discussion internally about that.
Awesome, great. I have another question, just a clarification. It is my understanding that there is some local law in New York City that says that 80% of our electricity must be produced locally, and this is why we have so many power plants. Is that correct?
I don't know. I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay. It seems that if it is correct, then what you're proposing, or what is being proposed, that is probably, more of the framework of the energy production, would actually veer away from that, where the electricity could be produced offshore of the coast of Montauk and upstate with those rivers and falls. Is that, do I understand that correctly?
Well, so if it was produced that far away, then it wouldn't be affecting any of our zoning regulations here in the city. So I think we're more concerned about what's happening within our own land mass. So if there was something that was produced, on Long Island and was piped over, that would be a different issue for us, I think.
But at the same time, how do you reach 100% renewable grid by 2040? Is that going to be 100% produced in New York City?
I don't think so, but we can get back to you on that too.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Any more questions from members of the committee? Any further questions? Andreas, I kind of feel like I'm going to call on you because you're such.
I just wanted to clarify that the floor area addition for insulation is not a bonus technically. It's just allowing you to insulate your building, since we are asking buildings to insulate more, and therefore it's not a bonus. You're just adding insulation which you can't use technically, right? You can't live in your insulation.
Yeah.
The question actually I had is what happens if someone uses, and that's also a very technical question, what happens if someone uses a vacuum insulation, which is only 1 inch, but has the effect of a 10-inch insulation? Do I still get the bonus, or is it really related to the thickness of the insulation itself?
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on the technical. So I think if you, Layla's got my email, Aaron's got my email, and Risa, I think you can just send me and Janelle your questions, and we'll we'll answer those.
Yeah, awesome. I think it's gonna be great to be able to just compile those and
Yeah.
send them in writing. Just another question, are you proposing any incentives to actually discourage practices that are, like very gluttonous in energy? For example, heated sidewalks to melt the snow?
I don't know of any that are that particular. I mean, I think the thing that they're doing is through the local law and the DOB fines. So the local laws create a system where if you're not, and I don't know what those incentives, what benchmarks each building has to meet, but I've been told that DOB at some point is going to start issuing fines, which, and I'm not sure how much those fines are, but it's good to start looking into what you can do to change over your building or start making some slow changes into your energy usage.
So it will be based on the energy use and not necessarily on some convoluted formula that says that if you have a planted roof, then you can be LEED whatever certified. There's a lot, we see a lot of that. Once again, I sort of like defer to Andreas, who is our absolute master on those super technical questions. But there are some ways to actually reach a pretty high level of energy efficiency when in reality you're also a real glutton.
Yeah, I can't speak to those particular how they read those different regulations and violations. I'm also curious, where is the heated sidewalk?
We see those applications all the time. All the super talls on Billionaires Row have heated sidewalks.
Do they really?
Yeah.
I guess as long as they are part of the source UI, then you probably wouldn't be able to do a heated sidewalk, but that should be clarified. What is part of the source UI?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to start to consider energy as being a finite supply rather than an infinite supply. So what the heated sidewalk is taking is as much energy that someone else is not getting. Renee, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, this is sort of related, sort of not, and I don't know if you can answer it. I guess local law 97 was sort of the first cut at this for buildings, right? Can you give us a sense of like how many buildings have been able to comply or get into line as of this?
I do not have that information, but I'll ask and see if we have it.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Any other questions from members of the committee? I have one quick additional one, Stephen. Sorry for having so many questions. Can you actually speak a little bit about these battery storage units, and how do you think that would play out in our district, which once again, is very, very densely built? Are we taking the risk of seeing those in very, inside buildings, but, maybe on the third floor with, padded with mechanical voids? Is it something that we need to be concerned with?
I mean, it's always a concern when somebody's putting infrastructure and it might be exposed and how that affects the surrounding areas. But I think conceptually, we've always kind of thought of it more as something that would be stored somewhere out of the way in a residential building, because nobody wants to be around that. I mean, space is so tight in Manhattan that we kind of conceptually think of them as being something that would be stored in a storage area, in the basement, in the garage, if you have a garage. But yeah, I think it's possible that it could be a roof too. But I think the larger ones would have to go through a BSA approval process. And I'm not sure exactly how many, I don't think anybody has those just yet, but I could look into how big they typically are for smaller buildings and for larger buildings and mid-sized buildings, because it does present another, infrastructure thing that I'm not sure, maybe Andreas knows. if these things in newer buildings are put on your roof and then screened, or if they're buried somewhere on, you know, the third or fourth floor of a tall building, or in the basement areas, but that's something I can look into for you guys.
Okay. Andreas, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Well,
on
I mean,
that.
I think storage. I mean, moving forward, let's look into the 20 years forward. I mean, battery is going to be only a short-term storage, so I don't know how big a role it will play in an urban setting like New York City. But I think the city certainly needs to think about the long-term storage, so seasonal storage from winter to summer. I don't know how we solve that problem.
Okay, Renee, you still have your hand up. Any follow-ups?
Yeah, I just have a follow-up, and I'm sorry for all the questions. Will we expect to see lots of players? Like, I know I get my energy, I think, from Con Ed now. Is this something that with all these different battery places, we'll expect to see lots of players and providers in the marketplace from this change?
Well, the batteries could be separate from the energy provider. So if you're building your local grid that's electrical in your building, or having your storage in your building, or having your charging or solar panels in your building, that's separate from Con Ed connecting you to that and doing and providing that energy. So I think you will have your private industry giving you those means, providing you some options, but then Con Ed is the main player here, who is got the larger energy grid, and they're tasked also with delivering 100% clean energy by 2040. So, and they have to be able to say, when Times Square in the middle of the night, or, at 11 p.m. and all the lights are on and it's 100 degrees out, everybody's got their ACs on, people are charging their cars, how are we going to be able to handle that, et cetera. So that's what they're looking at, and the city's working with Con Ed to make that happen too. So
A big challenge.
yeah.
All right, my last question is going to be my first question. When do we have to comment on that?
All right, I'll look that up. If that's it for the questions, I can go online and look that up and put it in the chat when the comments are done.
Awesome. Then I will open up the floor to members of the public. Members of the public, you can use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to speak. And we will start with Samir Lavingia. You are permitted to speak, Samir, and you can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to call in and say that I'm generally in favor of all these zoning changes. They're clearly needed to help residents and buildings comply with the Climate Mobilization Act. And clearly there's also a lot of federal and state funding that can be unlocked if these zoning text amendments go through. I think that it's important to remember that the critical work of Local Law 97 or the Climate Mobilization Act is actually to mobilize people, not to find them. And so if we want to actually get building owners to do the right thing and help us make the grid cleaner, we have to allow changes like this. The zoning text amendment has a lot of technical detail, and I hope that all the comments in the resolution will stay in scope to that. I definitely am interested in ideas like reducing energy usage and generating power in the East River, but hopefully we can have that discussion at a later time, not in the scope of the zoning text amendment. And then lastly, just wanted to say thank you to the Department of City Planning for putting together that annotated version of their zoning resolution with the changes, because it made it a lot easier to read and understand line by line why each change was made, and also for sharing accelerator.nyc, which was really cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Samir. The next question or comment goes to Charles. You are permitted to speak, and you can unmute
Hello.
yourself.
Hi there. So Stephen and Janelle, I was wondering what can be done for people like me who live in a older building that has they're not doing very well with energy efficiency. What can be done to introduce maybe like something as simple as a thermostat, because me and my other fellow tenants, we don't have thermostats in our apartments. So what happens is when we have a mild spring, the building is obligated by a certain date to keep the heat on. And then what happens is it gets so hot that I end up using an AC, when it's 60 degrees or 50 degrees outside. Also, obviously with cooking or with how heat rises in a building, sometimes it can get really, really hot. And I just thought it would really help if somehow there was a way to get some of these older buildings to have a thermostat so that tenants could, independently change the heating. And I was going to say, not only do I have an AC, it's so crazy that my building even put insulation over the hot pipe of the radiator, and still it really gets majorly hot. And I just feel like it's not really efficient when you have ACs running during a mild spring when it's not even summer, when the temperatures are not so dramatically cold outside. So I just wanted to bring attention to that issue. And also I feel like maybe if there's a possibility we could write in the resolution that with the transition to electric cars, which is all great, I'm all in favor for that. The thing is, Alexa, stop. They don't make much noise, so it's difficult for a blind person to hear the traffic when they're trying to find out when it's safe to cross the street. And the city doesn't have many of these audio pedestrian signals. So I feel like if we're moving forward with transitioning to electric cars, we need to make sure the city is completely covered with these audio pedestrian signals, as these electric vehicles don't make a lot of noise as the gas-powered vehicles. And congratulations on the awards for the committee, by the way, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. Okay, any more questions or comments from members of the public? Okay, so seeing none, we can move to business session. Stephen, do you have a date, a deadline for us to comment?
Sorry, I'm looking it up right now. It's I don't have the date at the moment, but it was 60 days from the referral. So it's approximately 2 months after the referral. So just give me another couple minutes and hopefully I can find it.
Okay, great. And it was referred, what, 2 weeks ago?
I think it was 3 weeks ago, 3-4 weeks ago.
Okay. So we are probably running into a tight deadline. Okay, and I actually want to see.
Yeah, I think it might be July 3rd might be the date.
Okay.
Because that'll be 60 days from the 2nd, because it was referred out 3 weeks ago, I think.
And our July full board meeting is on the 13th of July. Okay. All right, so that means that we need to bring this to the full board at this particular cycle. So it would have been wonderful to be able to take a little bit of time to really digest this very, very dense proposal. At the same time, I feel that we have some very specific questions that we may want to ask, but there is sort of like, a general overarching goal of this proposal that I think we have a good grasp of. So I would like to encourage the committee to actually consider the broad goal, while we may decide to tweak our recommendation as more information becomes available. Does that make sense to members of the committee? Okay, I see some heads nodding. All right, so let's go into comments from members of the committee. so that we can bring this to a vote. You can use the raise hand function. We need comments. Dave.
Well, I guess this is something we all are generally in favor of. Has to be done. We've seen what's happened, you know, with the climate change and everything. So yeah, I'm all for it.
Thank you, Dave. Other comments? Mary.
Yeah, just wanted to piggyback on what David said, absolutely needed, and looking forward to the responses to the great questions tonight.
Thank you, Mary. Aaron?
So total support, and exciting to hear these initiatives. I think the couple things that came up and some of the questions I have again are making sure that there's sort of mitigating any unintended consequences here, right? So we talked about a skyscraper building that may have valuable sun energy that is going to make a lot of profit, maybe selling it back to Con Ed. I know in some other states, there have been some issues with the grid where people on solar, are not just using that power for themselves, but they're selling it back to, the energy company. So I have a lot of questions about how that's going to be handled in the future. And then, in residential areas, there might be concerns of people living next to a battery storage facility, right? So it sounds like there's some rules and regulations. So it's not just the Wild West in terms of what can be built. But again, I think with the value of energy in the future, and this is a little bit like sort of, very futuristic looking, but I think there is going to be a real street value to the storage of energy. And I think we have to make sure that there's sort of legislation in place that doesn't become an unintended consequence here, where someone is in the business of energy storage and, how that mechanism works when it's not just used for energy on site. So again, that's just like a future challenge. And I don't know if the text gets into that detail, but I really support this. I think we have to be careful about the sort of unintended things that may pop up with this situation.
Yeah, totally agree. EJ.
Yeah, I'm gonna say a lot of what Aaron just said. I mean, obviously, I think we're all generally supportive. That this package really feels like it's the carrot to go with the stick of local law 97. So we're in principle very supportive of all the carrots provided in this package and the incentives enabling all the transformation that we need to see by 2030 and 2050 without particularly having time to get answers to all the questions that we raised, since we have to vote tonight, and to dig deeply into all the components here. I think we're all in supportive in principle. I think particularly we want to flag that, what Aaron said about the unintended consequences. I'm concerned here if any of the, zoning incentives that I haven't personally had a chance to really, dive into, we don't want any of these to enable the next loophole or the next mechanical void, and so at minimum, I think we need to raise awareness of the fact that, it's something we're concerned about, something that we're going to keep an eye on, and the city should use a lot of its existing authority and agency as this is implemented, if this gets implemented, to make sure that none of the components get abused in that way.
Yeah, totally agree. Andreas.
Yeah, I just want to also thank City Planning for the text amendment. I think it's a good approach, since the All Electric Building Act, in New York State, basically just electrifies building, but didn't specify anything, in my opinion, the most important ingredient, the efficiency of buildings. So I applaud you to attempt to include the building envelope efficiency here. It is a tough thing to specify in one page, I think, but I think it's great that you have it in there, especially the UI, and hopefully the industry can help you to make it more detailed so it's successful in the long run. But it's great that you have efficiency, which in my opinion is probably the most important part of electrification of building in your text amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. Okay, so it looks like we know where we're going with that. I want to thank the Department of City Planning for all the work that has gone into this proposal. I mean, you guys have been so incredibly busy, and we really value every bit of it. We're really very, very appreciative. Thank you, Janelle, for the presentation. It's great to have you on board. We really look forward to continuing to working with you. I think that, it looks like we are veering towards an approval. I think we want to make sure that there are not unintended consequences. The ones that I think is important to flag at this particular juncture are the ones that we talked about, and maybe in the coming week, as we submit all these questions, we'll refine them and tweak them. But I think that, establishing a concept of a right to sunlight would really go a long way. I think it would be a terrific principle. It would be a terrific precedent, and it would also apply to our parks and open spaces, which, we feel currently the tool to actually, protect that asset it does not exist to the extent that it should. Would love to have some language about how the seeker formula can be reworked. I think that, we don't like seeker for so many reasons. So maybe we'll add, another reason why we want it to be reformed. It is about time. I think that, we want to make sure that we don't end up with a mechanical void loophole where, developers put tiny little batteries and build these, giant spaces to shield them from whatever, and we end up with taller buildings. Our districts are mostly don't have height limits, and we know that this is like a very appealing proposition for developers who are trying to build the tallest building they can, because this is, as the developer said, the money shot. So we want to make sure that we don't end up with those unintended consequences. It is clearly not the intention of the text, and I think that it's clear that the intention of the text is supported by this board, certainly by this committee, and should be reflected in the resolution. So what I would like to suggest to members of the committee is that we pass a resolution that is overall supportive. I think this is what the discussion reflects, that we note the concerns that we have that have been expressed, and that we continue to look at these specific issues. We're going to submit some questions in writing, and as the answers become available, that will inform the final resolution. Okay, all right. So we need a motion, which I can't make because I'm the chair. So who wants to make a motion?
Moved.
Thank you. Second. Okay. And then, just to make it clear, the motion is to express support for the proposed zoning text amendment, and noting the concerns that have just been spelled out. All right. Are there any questions to the motion? No questions to the motion, so we're ready to take it to a vote. Aaron, first and last vote of the evening.
Okay. Let's see, CJ.
Yes.
Mike Greeley.
Yes.
Andreas.
Yes.
Renee.
Yes.
EJ.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Okay. Aaron is a yes. Layla.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously.
So Nancy, did we call on you? Did Aaron call on you? Yeah. Okay. So motion passes unanimously. Aaron, do we have a unanimous vote?
Yes. 11-0-0-0.
Okay, great, fantastic. All right, thank you so much, Stephen and Janelle, really appreciate it. Members of the committee, before we adjourn the meeting, we have a new business item that I wanted to bring to your attention, and I'm actually thrilled that Stephen is, oh, did he log out? Janelle, if you can stay with us, that would be wonderful. I'm going to be very brief, but it has to do with it could interest the Department of City Planning. As you recall, members of the committee, we did review an application last month for parking space at a building on the corner of 5th Avenue and 29th Street. We found out in the course of the review of this application for parking space by special permit that the building is going to be 56 stories, over 1,000 feet tall, that the building is entirely as of right, and that the building is going to have 26 apartments, once again, for 56 stories. We were quite outraged when we heard that, and subsequent to this meeting, we have received a number of communications expressing similar outrage, the lack of providing any housing, quite frankly. But we have actually heard from members of our community about the fact that not only this building is totally outrageously too tall, has too few apartments, but it is built directly in front of the Empire State Building on this beautiful vista corridor along Broadway. And this is creating quite a bit of uproar. As we know, currently there is no environmental review needed for buildings that are as of right. But at the same time, this building is going to really cause a lot of damage to a public asset, which is, the view on a landmark building. So I really feel that, it is important that we tackle this issue. To be quite frank, I don't know if it is a land use issue or landmarks issue or maybe both. But what I would like to do, I wanted to flag it for you. And I think that next month we need to put it on the agenda. And in the meantime, we need to think about how we're going to tackle it. Maybe the Landmarks Preservation Commission can get involved because of the Vista corridor. Maybe we can make the case that the building is simply, too tall, given the number of units that are being provided. We just need to, do a little bit of research, do a little bit of thinking on how we can advocate for a better outcome, because right now really we're getting nothing out of this building. So wanted to flag it. Dave, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, one quick question. We had the same problem, I recall, with the Hyatt hotel being so close to the Chrysler building. Is there been any news about whether that's going on as planned, or
yeah,
do we know anything
this is going on. For this one, the gesture that the developer made was that they are building a raised open space, and that this raised open space is actually creating a new view, new vista point onto the Chrysler building that currently doesn't exist, and that will be, publicly accessible. So, that was a little bit of mitigation. But, the impact that this building is going to cause is a magnitude of 10 compared to what the Hyatt is doing to the Chrysler. It is really one of the most magnificent viewpoints that you can have on the Empire State Building. It is at this juncture between 5th Avenue and Broadway, and this building is going to entirely obliterate it. So, I think, I invite you all to think about how we can tackle this issue, what kind of solutions we can propose, and just wanted to give you the heads up that we'll be discussing that next month. EJ.
Leila, we've worked with some outside partners in the past who were able to help us visualize certain corridors and certain sight lines. I wonder if visual aids might be helpful here.
Yes, so that's a very good point. So you may recall that we partnered, I think it was 2 years ago, with an app designer who created a very cool augmented reality application where basically you can visualize a proposed building in situ, and it's actually the name of the app. Where you can basically look at your screen on site and you can see the impact of that the building is going to have on its surroundings. It is my understanding. So we partnered with the developer back probably 2 years ago, and she used a building model in CV5 to do her proof of concept. And since then, she has launched the app. And my understanding is that every building that is currently being built is actually all the data and all the information is in the app. So I can certainly reach out to her and make sure that this is correct. And if it is, we can maybe do a little field trip where, we can all stand with an iPad or an iPhone. And, provided that we have downloaded the app, which is free, we can basically visualize what the impact is going to be once the building is completed. That's a good idea. All right. Are there any other questions or comments on this new business? No. Okay, great. So I think we are ready to adjourn the meeting. Again, thanks so much. And I will see you all at full board on June 8th. Have a good evening, everyone. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.